Welcome everyone to Siyum, Seder Horayot, Masechet Horayot and Seder Nezikin. We're very excited to have you all with us. We're very excited to be finishing, for those finishing Horayot, for those finishing the whole Seder, and for those who just came to be part of our Seder, our Siyum. So our Siyum today is sponsored by the Tannenbaum family in loving memory of their beloved mother, grandmother, Ruth Zemsky, Zechrona Livracha, Rezel Bat Chaya Kela, on her 9th yahrzeit on the 23rd of Elul, marking the completion of Nezikin, a Seder that focuses on Ben Adam L'Chavero, both in the building and healing of society, aptly reflects the life she led. She was a paragon of sensitivity and taking care of the other, often those unseen, in community work and home. Her example continues to inspire us all. Yehi Zichra B'Av. And our learning will also be for also the safety of our soldiers, for the safe return of our hostages, and for the refuah shleima of all of our soldiers and other people injured. What we're going to do today is we have a special program. We gathered together a lot of our usual regular teachers to share with us their thoughts at the end of this Seder. So the order is going to be the usual. We're going to finish the Masechet. Then we're going to do the Hadrans. We have a special Siyum HaShas of Julie Mendelsohn. And so she'll be saying the Hadrans also with us, with her Siyum HaShas. Thank you for sharing it with us, Julie. You've been with us from the very beginning, which is really nice. And we're going to hear from Dr. Yael Hoffmann Libson, Rabbanit Yael Shimoni. Then we're going to have a little break. Maggie's going to do a little demo about the website, a few words about the website. And then we're going to hear from Elana Stein, Hain, who's going to do an introduction to Seder Kodashim. Felt like this time we really need an introduction before we go into it. We also, those who haven't listened to Ayelet's introduction, that will be one type of introduction, and recommended if you haven't yet listened, it's already up. And Elana will give a bit of a different type of introduction, and then we'll end with the tefillah. So with that, we're going to get started. As you saw from already, we started this morning, very, very interesting end of the Masechet, and it only gets more interesting. So I ended kind of in the middle of the story, and we're going to go back and review a bit of the story outside, and then we'll continue inside from where we left off. We have this story. First, we got a halacha, which is the rules about showing respect for the nasi, for the av beitin, and for the chacham. And we saw that there was a differentiation of what you're supposed to do for each of them. And then they came along and said that, by the way, this all happened in the time of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. It used to be that everyone would walk in, the three of them, and everybody would stand up. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, very secretly, and I would say a little bit deceptively, switched the rules one day when Rabbi Natan and Rabbi Meir, the Av Beitin and the Chacham, happened not to be in the room. And when they came in the next day, and all of a sudden people were standing up for them in a bit of a different way than yesterday, and it was clear they were being shown less respect than the Nasi, they got very upset, to which Rabbi Meir seems to be the main plotter here. And he plotted and got Rabbi Natan on his side to basically try to trip up Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel by basically saying, let's ask him about Masechet Uktzin, because he doesn't really know Masechet Uktzin, and we can really trip him up. Okay, I wanted to just stop for a moment before we continue with the story and talk about this Masechet Uktzin. I thought of three possible reasons why specifically Masechet Uktzin. First of all, speaking of Siyum HaShas, so Uktzin happens to be the very last Seder of the Mishnah, of the Shisha Sedrei Mishnah. It's the very last one. It's a very short Masechet. What Raveni Lau in his book Chachamim, he connects this to the story of Rabbah was asking for rain and wasn't answered in Masechet Tanit. I don't know if you remember this story, but he says, I don't understand, because Rav Yehuda just took off his shoes and the rain came, and he knows less Torah than we do. He only knows, interestingly enough, he only knows Seder Nezikin, okay? But we know, and when he talks about Uktzin, he says, that's like Havayot of Rav and Shmuel. Those are things I really don't understand. And we know all the Shisha Sedrei Mishnah, and we're even B'kiyum B'Uktzin, okay? So I thought that it was very interesting to compare this story, because we're going to talk about this idea. Is it all about chokhmah? Is that what's important, right? And it was clear about that story is it's not all about being the smartest one in the room, right? It obviously takes other things to get the rain to come. So that was one thing about Uktzin. Another, by the way, the Hebrew word la'akotz, right? The same root is to now I'm blocking the word out, but it's to sting, like to bite, la'akotz someone. Okay, so I thought that was interesting in terms of the story. They're basically uktzimoto with Masechet Uktzin. And the third thing is what Uktzin is all about. Uktzin is all about the stem of the fruit, and does it contract tuma, impurity, like the fruit itself? And I was thinking that it's similar to what's going on here because they're not the central character, but they're kind of important, right? That you need these three people in the Beit Midrash, and they're each almost like the handle of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. They want to be treated in the same way, which is the same idea of the stem being connected. So I thought those were some ideas to connect. Anyway, what happens in the story is that that then Rabbi Yaakov ben, I have to remember how to pronounce his name exactly, but Rabbi Yaakov ben Kishni, I have to check, but he basically goes to the attic, to the like nearby where Rabban Shimon Gamliel was living on the second floor, and he starts reciting Masechet Uktzin out loud so that Rabban Shimon Gamliel will hear. Rabban Shimon Gamliel gets wind that something weird is going on. He pays really close attention. He learns the whole thing. When they try to embarrass him the next morning, he gets what's going on, and he recites all of Masechet Uktzin, and they realize that they're in trouble. And he says, obviously, I could see, if I hadn't learned this, you would have humiliated me. That's where we ended. And he basically kicks them out of the Beit Midrash. Now they're out of the Beit Midrash. Sim reminds us of that story of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Let's continue on what happens. So we're about in my Gemara at 6 lines from the bottom. So they start writing questions and they throw them. You can imagine like paper airplanes, and they start throwing them into the Beit Midrash. If people were able to answer the question, they answered it. Now, when people didn't have the answer, they would write the answer and throw it in the Beit Midrash. Rabbi Yossi, after a while of this going on, Rabbi Yossi says, this is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. He's often known as the peacemaker. And he says, this seems very strange. The Torah is outside. We're sitting inside. This doesn't seem appropriate. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, fine, we'll let them in. Mihu, however, but you know what? We're going to penalize them and we're not going to say anything in their name. Okay, basically, when we pass down their Torah, we're going to pass it down anonymously. Asiku Rabbi Meir Acherim. We're going to call it Acherim. You might remember we've had Acherim a bunch of times in the Mishnah, and we say it's Rabbi Meir. Now we finally have the story as to where that came from. Ula Rabbi Natan Yesh Omrim. And when Rabbi Natan says it, we'll say Yesh Omrim. Some say. Now, they have a dream. Seems like Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan end up with the same dream. Zilu Faisula Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. In the dream, they're told you should go make peace with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Natan azo, Rabbi Meir lo azo. So Rabbi Natan goes, Rabbi Meir doesn't. Rabbi Meir, as you could see, is the initiator. He wasn't willing to try to make peace. It's a very strange thing what happens here in another minute, but you'll see. Anyway, Rabbi Meir doesn't want to go. We don't follow chalamot. We don't follow our dreams, right? We don't pay attention to dreams. I'm ignoring it. But ki aza Rabbi Natan, and this is what's a little bit strange. What happens? You expect he's going to go and appease Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Amalei Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, nihida ahani lach kamar da'avuch lemea ve'av beitin shavin achnami nasi. If he goes to appease, you would expect maybe Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would make peace with him, but instead he throws it in the statement that says, "What you think you have the belt of your father because your father was a prominent person. He was the Reish Galuta in Babylonia. You think that you can the exilarch. You think that you can take that and that will make you the nasi here? No way, no how." Okay, so that was the appeasing, which didn't work so well. Now we fast forward. Okay, the story kind of ends, but we fast forward. We're not done with the story. Manala Rebbe le Rabbi Shimon Berei. Okay, remember there's Rabbi Gamliel, who we know, right? We had a recent story with him and Rabbi Yehoshua, and we've had the famous story with him and Rabbi Yehoshua about also kicking people out of the Beit Midrash. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's his son, and then there's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, also known as Rebbe, is teaching Rabbi Shimon some Torah. And he teaches him this Mishnah in Bechorot. Acherim omrim, ilu hayat mura, lo hayat kachev. You have to go a little bit of background for this, which is there's a halacha masir behema. The 10th animal is sanctified. Now, what if you accidentally count wrong and you count the 9th as the 10th? So the 9th becomes sanctified as well. But the 10th is still sanctified because the 10th is the 10th. But if you take the 10th and you say, well, this will be in place of the 9th one, because the 9th one you call 10, when you realize you miscounted, and you make the 10th the 9th, and then you make the 11th, well, you'll kind of start counting again, and you say 10 is 9 and 11 is 10. So now you have a big confusing situation because you've now called 9th the 10th, and you've also called the 11th the 10th, and also the 10th was really the 10th, even though you didn't call it the 10th. So Rabbi Meir basically says that all of those are sanctified. The ninth, you have to leave till it gets a blemish, and then because the animal has to be sacrificed, but it can't be because it's not really the 10th. The 10th has to be sacrificed like Maser Behema, and the 11th needs to basically be left to be brought as a shlemim, as a peace offering, because it has to be brought as a korban, but not the same way. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with him, and then Rabbi Meir's response, and there's basically Rabbi Yehuda says, what, you're going to make a tmura to a tmura, a substitution of a substitution, because he viewed the 11th as a substitution, to which Rabbi Meir said, Ilu haya tmura lo haya karev. You're right, it can't be a tmura of a tmura. There's no substitution of a substitution here. This isn't the 11th is coming in place of the 10th, because what Rabbi Meir said is that since I forgot one point, since the 11th is a shlamim, if you made a substitution for it and you tried to take a different animal in its place, which you're not allowed to do, but the animal would actually be sanctified, to which Rabbi Yehuda said, what are you doing? Not Rabbi Yehuda on the sea, don't get confused. Rabbi Yehuda says, how could that be? It's a tmura of a tmura, a substitution of a substitution. He says, no, if it was really a tmura, then you're right. But I don't view this 11th coming in place of the 10th, right, and bringing it as a shlamim. It's a shlamim. It's not a substitution. Okay, this seems like a very odd, right, thing to be talking about here. Why are we talking about tmura, substitution? I don't know if your brain's working and thinking in these lines, but to me, all of a sudden, what am I thinking about, right? Substitution. We have what's going on here is they're trying to substitute themselves in place of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, right? So we're going to get back to this in a minute, but you can already start thinking. So he quotes Rabbi Meir, but he quotes it in the name of Acherim. Amar lo, mihem alalu shemehem anu shotim u'shmotam ein anu mazkirim. Okay, like a classic child, Rabbi Shimon says, what's going on here? Why are you not mentioning, right? The kids always ask the good questions. That's why I said classic child, right? They key in on the what's going on right away. And he says, who are these people that were drinking their water and their names we're not mentioning, right? It almost sounds like Rabbi Yossi, like how could the Torah be outside and we're sitting inside, right? Things are off kilter here. He says, how are we drinking their water and we're not even mentioning their name? Marley, now we're talking we're talking a generation later. They're not even alive anymore, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan. These are people who try to uproot the respect of our family. So comes the son, and he says, but they're gone. They're not alive anymore. Their hatred is not alive, right? Their love, their hatred. It's a pasuk in Kohelet, right? And their kinah, their jealousy is no longer here. So why are you bearing a grudge? They're not even alive anymore. Amar le ha'oyev tamu charabot lanetzach. Okay, their swords, the enemy's swords, will always be here forever. Amar le. Now here he comes, and the son is still kind of fighting about this. And the son says, but that's hechad ahanu ma'asayu. That's when they're successful. But Rabbanan lo ahanu ma'asayu. They didn't even do anything to you in the end, right? They didn't do anything to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in the end. Nothing happened, right? They tried to humiliate him, but they weren't even successful. So it's one thing if your enemy is successful against you. Yes, maybe that pasuk is relevant, but enough already. So he convinces his father. What does his father do? Almost, okay? Almost pushes him completely over the edge, but he retains one little point. So what happens? Hadran ele amre mishum Rabbi Meir. And by the way, if you look in that Mishnah Bechorot, it's at the very end of Masechet Horayot, if you want to look, it says there, Amru mishum Rabbi Meir, this line about the tmura. Ilu haya tmura lo haya karev. He wouldn't say Rabbi Meir said, he said they say in Rabbi Meir's name. Okay, he wasn't willing to go that far, but he got close. Amarava afilu Rebbe da amvatanahu. Tana Amru Mishum Rabbi Meir Amar Rabbi Meir Lo Amar. Okay, he wouldn't say Rabbi Meir said it, even though Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was a big anav. He was known for his humility, and he still wouldn't let go of this issue, and he kept it. He came up with this compromise situation. Okay, I think this idea of the tmura. Okay, I think first of all, there's this idea from the story about the. I think the 3 is very interesting. By the way, there's a whole halacha with Maser Behema. If you do it with the 8th and you do it with the 12th, it's not relevant. It's only the 3 because they're close to the 10. And I think there's this idea of, there's the Nasi and then the Ab Beit Din and the Chacham. They were all this threesome, and each one kind of had their place. And right, what was happening is, right, the 9th was the 10th and the 11th was the 10th, and right, they were trying to move things around. And in the end, of all the things that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is quoting, it's specifically, he quotes Rabbi Meir almost like saying Rabbi Meir should take his own advice, and that the substitution, What he was saying is, if it was really a substitution, it never would have been sacrificed. Meaning, if you really had tried to substitute yourself in his place, you never would have succeeded, right? You were trying to put yourself into a place that you didn't belong. Okay, fine. We're going to put this aside for a minute, and then we'll come back and pull this all together. So the next part is really talking about different kinds of leaders, okay? Very appropriate for our Masechet. It seems to be here because there's another machloka between Rabbi Shimon and Gamliel and the rabbis, and we weren't really talking about a machloka before, but clearly he was in some tension with the rabbis. Okay, this is very famous. Are you better off being someone who has all the knowledge, or you're better off with someone as your leader who is Oker Harim, who has great analytical skills? Okay, uproot mountains. So one said this, one said that. We don't know who said what. Rabbi Yosef, see, now it's interesting. Probably Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was the one who said the Oker Harim, because he was the one who didn't have all the Gemara under, right, all the Mishnah under his belt. But we don't know actually. Rabbi Yosef Sinai Rabba Oker Harim. This is very famous, and in fact, it appears in Brachot as well, so it might sound familiar to you. Rabbi Yosef was a Sinai, Rabba was Oker Harim. Shacholit Hamanda. They had to appoint one of them as the Rosh Hashiva. They sent a message to Eretz Yisrael, and they said, which one should we do? Eze mehem kodem, shachalu Sinai adif. Tamar mar, akol tzruchim lemari chatya. Because everybody needs the wheat. The wheat are the basics. That's the knowledge. Basically, go with the one who has the most knowledge. That's what they said in Israel. But in Babylonia, apparently that wasn't their approach. And this is, by the way, a big difference between, Rabbanit also talks about this in his book, the difference between this is in the newest volume, about the difference between Israel and Babylonia in this sense. But anyway, we don't have the time for this today. According to our version here, and this comes up in different versions in other places, but Rabbi Yosef wouldn't accept the position. Malach Rabba Eslim v'Tartin Shnin. So Rabba was in charge for 22 years until he died. V'Hadra Malach Rabbi Yosef. Then Rabbi Yosef became the head of the yeshiva. V'Choshnei de Malach Rabba. Rabbi Yosef afilu umana lebeite lo chalif. He would make sure that the uman would never even, the bloodletter wouldn't come to his house. He basically was trying to show, I'm just like everybody else. Don't treat me with respect. He didn't want to step on the toes of Rabbi. He was very careful, right? Kind of the reaction to that previous story. Abai v'Rabba Rabbi Zera, another story. V'Rabba Barmani, these four rabbis have a yatve v'abtzriche resha. They needed someone to lead their learning. Amre kolda amar milta v'lo mifrach lehavi resha. Here it's all about the knowledge. Anyone who can ask a question and who can say something, and we won't knock down his, we won't question what he said, will be in charge. Jakulu ifrach, everything everybody said, they knocked down. But to Abai lo ifrach. And therefore, Chazi Rabba la Abai degava resha. Bunch of different interpretations here, but we'll just go with Rabba saw that Abai lifted up his head as if, oh, I guess it's me. Amar le Nachmani ptach ve'ema. Nachmani, open up and speak. Oh, a whole bunch of different opinions about whether Nachmani was a derogatory phrase about him or it was actually a respectful phrase about him. But again, we'll put that issue aside right now. In the end, he ends up being the one to lead. It sounds like it wasn't like heading the yeshiva there. It was just leading their group. Now we're going to end in a very, very interesting way. Ibayalu. And I challenge you to look and see if any other Masechet ends with this last word. Okay, I don't believe it's true, but I might not remember. Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Bar Matna, Heminayu Adif. So we have Rabbi Zera, we have Rabbi Bar Matna. Who is the better leader? Rabbi Zera, so which one? Rabbi Zera, Charif Umakshe. He's very sharp and he has very strong questions. Rabbi Bar Matna, Matun, he's much more tamed, controlled, umasik, but he concludes, right? It's very good to ask a lot of questions, but you might not come to conclusions. So which one? And the Gemara answers with Teku. We don't know. So what is going on at the end of this Masechet? It's a fascinating end, and particularly because of our Masechet in general. I think what's going on here is we had a whole Masechet about leadership and leaders making mistakes and leaders learning from their mistakes, right? If we take the story of Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua, right? Rabban Gamliel in the beginning is kind of living in his elitist world, doesn't even bring enough food, ends up eating from the person who doesn't really have a lot, right? Who's poor in general, but was smart enough to bring food, right? And in the end, he sees the other side and he realizes and he puts up at the head of the yeshiva these other people and he says, really leadership is not about respect and it's really about working hard. And he does this shift. And I think what's going on here is this idea about leaders. Number one, I think there's a concept here of the whole end of the Masechet is different people are different, right? And some people have these strengths and some people have those strengths. And what's the best recipe for a leader, right? Believe it or not, they didn't know it then. We still don't know what the recipe for the true leader is. We're always struggling with this question. Who will be the best leader? Otherwise, right, we'd have an obvious, clear leader all the time and everyone vote for the same person, but it's not so clear. Some people think this person, some people think that person. And it's always a struggle to figure out, right, how to find the right leader. But in the end, I think they end with Teku saying in the end that it's all about the leaders, like sort of saying that we're not going to find the perfect leader. And we talk about this a lot at the end of Masechet, that the end of Masechet often ends with, there's a lot of things that are not clear, that are not black and white. And in the end, our leaders are going to be who they are. Each one has their strengths, and they each have to learn, if we go back to our Masechet, that it's all about finding the right path and recognizing your mistakes and moving forward and learning from your mistakes and bringing the korbanot and moving on, right? And nowadays we don't have korbanot, but we do have the Yamim Noraim, which are coming up in that time of year where we do our introspection, and might do it on a daily basis, but also particularly this time of year. And I think that our Masechet is ending with this idea of nothing is perfect, and yet we always have to strive at least to try to get to the closest we can to perfection. So that's some idea to leave you with this Masechet. With that, Hadran alach kohen Mashiach, slikala Masechet Horayot. So I'm going to say the Hadrans right now, and we'll bring them up, and also slikala Masechet Seder Nezikin. Okay, so if you're finishing the Seder, you'll say the whole thing. If you're finishing just Horayot, you could just say Masechet Horayot. And if you're here just watching, you can just listen. Okay, here we go. And then I'll invite Julie up. After we do the first 3 Hadrans, Julie will say a small dedication, and then she'll say her 3rd Hadran. Hadran alach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Hadrach Halan. Da'atan alach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Da'atach Halan. Lo nitnashe minach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'lo titnashe minan, lo ba'alma haden, v'lo ba'alma da'ate. Hadran alach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Hadrach Halan. Da'atan alach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Da'atach Halan. Lo nitnashe minach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'lo titnashe minan, lo ba'alma haden, v'lo ba'alma da'ate. Hadran alach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Hadrach Halan. Da'atan alach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Da'atach Halan. Lo nitnashe minach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'lo titnashe minan, lo ba'alma haden, v'lo ba'alma da'ate. Okay, Julie.
Okay. I'm so honored and really overwhelmed to be here with my esteemed teacher and teachers and all the students. And I wrote a piece, and I hope you'll read it. It's on the website. But I just wanted to say a small dedication. When I started learning Daf Yomi, I thought it was for me. But now I realize it wasn't for me. We learned in the Torah yesterday in Kitavo that if we want to keep the blessings of this land, we need to keep the whole Torah. And how can we keep it if we don't know it? The Talmud isn't something that belongs exclusively to yeshiva students. It's for all of us. And I feel an obligation to acquire this knowledge and pass it on as a link in a chain from generations past to our generation, to future generations. I want to dedicate my Siyum to all those soldiers and civilians who started this Daf Yomi cycle and didn't get to finish because they were killed in this war. And to some very close friends, fellow learners who we lost along the way to illness. We just learned a few days ago in Horayot Daf Vav, Ein mita b'tzibur. There's no death with regard to a congregation. Those individuals finish their job in this world, but we, the congregation, have to continue to learn and to act in their memory and in their merit, and that's what we're going to do. Hadran alach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Talmud Bavli, v'Hadrach Halan. Datan alach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Talmud Bavli, v'Da'atach Halan. Lo nitnashe minach Masechet Horayot, Seder Nezikin, v'Talmud Bavli, v'lo titnashe minan, lo ba'alma haden, v'lo ba'alma hadate.
יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שתהא תורתך אומנותנו בעולם הזה, ותהא עמנו לעולם הבא. חנינה בר פאפא, רמי בר פאפא, נחמן בר פאפא, אחי בר פאפא, אבא בר פאפא, רחמן בר פאפא, רחיש בר פאפא, סורחה בר פאפא, עדה בר פאפא, דרו בר פאפא. הערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ובפיות עמך בית ישראל. ונהיה אנחנו, כולנו, צאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. מהווי תחכמני מצוותיך, כי לעולם היא לי. יהי ליבי תמים בחוקיך, למען לא אבוש, לעולם לא אשכח פיקודיך, כי בם חייתני, ברוך אתה אדוני למדני חוקיך, אמן, 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 סלע ועד. יהי רצון לפניך אדוני אלוהי, כשם שעזרתני לסיים מסכת הוריות וסדר נזיקין, כן תעזרני להתחיל מסכתות וספרים אחרים ולסיימם, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. וזכות כל התנאים והאמוראים ותלמידי חכמים יעמוד לנו ולזרענו, שלא תמוש התורה מפינו ומפי זרענו עד עולם. ויתקיים בנו, בתהלכך תנחה אותך, בשוכבך תשמור עליך, בהקיצות אי תשיחך. כי בי ירבו ימיך, ויוסיפו לך שנות חיים, אורך ימים בימינה, שמאלה אושר וכבוד, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אשר כוחכם, ממש, wow. It's a huge hesed to finish Seder Nezikin and Masechet Horayot, which might have been a small Masechet, but it was not so simple. Okay, we're just going to read the first line, and I just want to point out one small thing, especially because we have Elana's intro today, so I don't need to do much about Zvachim. But kol Zvachim shenizbachu shelo lishman ksherim, ela shelo alu labaalim l'shem chova. Okay, the Masechet starts off with this idea of something lo lishma, about having the wrong intent. And what I just want to point out, I'm not going to even go into the details of this, but what's fascinating always to me is the big shift, even though we did have a whole bunch of kind of preparation for Zvachim, as we talked about in Horayot, but there's a huge switch, because one of the main themes of Seder Nezikin was Adam U'al Olam. You're responsible for your actions, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, it doesn't matter. But the Zvachim, shenizbachu shelo lishmam, all of a sudden we enter the world of Zvachim, and your intent becomes super important. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind as we go through Seder Masechet Zvachim and learning all about the intention being important, as opposed to your actions being important. I think it's a big shift between the two. Okay, with that, we're going to move on with our program. So I'm very excited to introduce, as I said in the beginning, our regular weekly speakers or Masechet speakers, and Dr. Yael Libson Hoffmann has been teaching for us for a very long time, introductions to all the Masechtot, and she's been writing a book with the introductions to the Masechtot, and we're very excited to have her. Well, I'm sure when it comes out, everyone will be very thrilled to buy her book, and it's a really important book because it's a really good way to kind of have a sense of the background to all the Masechtot. That's why I love having these introductions. It gives you the perspective, which is really important. And with that, we'll hear from Yael.
Thank you, Michelle. It's very good to be here, very exciting, and always nice to participate in joyful moments during this difficult time. So thank you to all for affording that opportunity. I want to speak briefly about the idea of repentance, tshuva, within Seder Nezikin. And I want to start from a famous statement that the Gemara brings in Masechet Baba Kama, where there's a discussion there between two Amoraim about what one should study. If you only have time to study one thing, if you're not going to have time to study the whole Shas, what should you study if you want to become a Chassid? Amar Rav Yehuda, Hai man debai lemehave Chasida, lekayem milei de nezikin. Rav Yehuda said, one who wants to be a Chassid, who wants to be pious, should observe the matters of nezikin. Rava amar milei de avot, ve'amre la milei de brachot. Rava said it's the matters of Masechet Avot. That's what you should learn if you want to be pious. And some say, or perhaps a different version of Rava's statement, you should learn the matters of brachot. So I want to start actually from Avot and from brachot, because I think that these are much more intuitive things to consider for a person who wants to become pious, right? We can actually see here three different realms of a person's life. The matters of avot. What's really avot? Avot is, it's ethics, right? We often call it ethics of the fathers. So that the matters of ethics are often related to what kind of person am I, right? What is my morality? How do I become a more moral person? So it has to do with society, but I think it's more focused on the self. And brachot represents an entirely different realm. It's the realm of ben adam lamakom, right? Of saying brachot, of saying Baruch atah Hashem. So it's being in dialogue with God. And these are things that we intuitively associate with what it means to be a chassid, to be someone who's pious, either the realm of ethics or the more religious realm, the realm of ben adam lamakom. And so against this backdrop, Rav Yehuda's statement is actually pretty surprising. That Rav Yehuda said one who wants to be pious should observe the matters of Nezikin. Nezikin is really the classic realm of Ben Adam L'Chavero. It's not ethics. It's not being focused on myself, on what kind of person am I. It's not the realm, the religious realm, the vertical axis of between myself and God. It's the horizontal axis of who am I with society, right? And that's why really Nezikin, I think for those who have been studying it throughout, it's really the most similar to other legal systems that we recognize. And there's something very, very familiar about Nezikin in general. So the question is, why does Rav Yehuda think this? What is it about Nezikin that makes a person more pious, a person more chassid? And I think that we can see, throughout Masechet, throughout Seder Nezikin, we can see many different examples. But I want to focus on one specific example, which is also related to this time of the year, to Elul, and to think about what exactly is unique about Teshuva in the realm of Nezikin. So the Mishnah in Masechet Baba Kama discusses in the 8th chapter the damages that are created when a person injures another person. And the Mishnah there, I want to look at two Mishnayot from chapter 8, the first Mishnah and the last Mishnah. The first Mishnah says, "Hachovel b'chavero chayav alav mishum chamisha dvarim." So one who wounds another person is liable to compensate him on 5 counts, 5 different kinds of compensation. Nezek, injury, right? The direct damages that can be seen by the injury. Tsa'ar, so the pain that a person experiences when they were hurt. Ripui, so the healing or the medical costs that need to be incurred in order to return a person to where they were before they were injured. Shevet, loss of income, what they can't earn while they're sitting at home after their injury. And boshet, so indignity or shame. So the Mishnah is spelling out here these 5 different categories. And in general, these categories are understood as we estimate what is each of these damages for kind of the average person, for the reasonable person. Okay, except for boshet, which is generally understood to be something which is something more subjective. So it depends on the status of the person. That's how we will determine, the fall from grace, the shame that a person experiences depends on their status to begin with. Now I want to look at the last Mishnah of this chapter. And the Mishnah here says that after a person, right, the rest of this chapter in the Mishnah details the details of each of these 5 categories. But the concluding Mishnah of the chapter says, "Af al pi shehu noten lo," wait, I'm going to lift it up a bit because I know that my head is bobbing around on the bottom somewhere, even though I can't see it. "Af al pi shehu noten lo," so even though a person has paid all of these damages, all these different categories, there's still one thing left that needs to be taken care of. "Eino nimcha lo ad sheyevakesh mimeno." He's not forgiven until he seeks forgiveness from the injured party. Shene'emar, a verse regarding Avraham and Avimelech. Avimelech, who took Sarah and then returned her to Avraham. And the verse says, "V'ata hashev eshet ha'ish ki navihu." Okay, you have to, it's not enough to just give the wife back. You're going to have to also speak to him and create some kind of a dialogue until Avraham will pray for you. Okay, so the verse here is emphasizing this kind of relational aspect that needs to happen in addition to the payment for the damages. And what's interesting is that the Gemara on this Mishnah cites a Braita, which at first seems to be very, very similar, but with one important difference. So the Braita says as follows, "Tanu Rabbanan, kol elu she'amru," all the sums that were detailed in the previous Mishnah, which we didn't read, "Dmei boshto." This refers to the category of boshet, of humiliation. "Aval tsa'aro," but in order to compensate for tsa'ar, for the category of pain, "Afilu hevi kol eilei nevayot sheba'olam, en nimcha lo ad sheyevakesh mimeno." Even if he brought all of these special rams of nevayot, then the transgression isn't forgiven until he requests forgiveness. As it is stated, "Hashev eshet ha'ish ki navihu ve'itpalel ba'adcha." So the same verse, right? So it seems to be that the Braita is very, very close to the Mishnah. But what's the difference? That the Braita is adding one more point, right? That it's saying all of these payments that have been described earlier, this refers to boshet. But tsa'ar, pain, that is something that even if a person gives a huge sum of payment, there won't be forgiveness, there won't be mechila, ad sheyevakesh mimeno. So this seems a bit counterintuitive because, as I mentioned before, tsa'ar is considered an objective category in general, right? That we estimate what is the pain that a person would be willing to incur in order to have this damage done to them, while boshet is something that is more subjective. And I think for that reason, Rashi comments on this Braita. Oh, sorry, I didn't bring you Rashi, but Rashi says that that the tsa'ar that is described in this Braita is the tsa'ar of the person suffering about his shame. Okay, Rashi says, "Shedoeg al boshto eino nimcha lo." Okay, so what Rashi is saying here, he's actually turning things on its head. He's saying what you cannot compensate for monetarily, but rather you must have a conversation and you must ask for mechila, is specifically the tsa'ar. What kind of tsa'ar? It's the tsa'ar about a person's shame. So what Rashi is doing in the way that he's explaining this Braita is he's making the point that in order to, beyond all the 5 payments that you have to compensate a person monetarily, there's another aspect, and that's the aspect of mechila, of forgiveness, for which you have to have a conversation. You have to have bakashat mechila. You have to have, the injurer has to go to the injured party and has to ask him for forgiveness. And this relational view of damages, I think, is very reminiscent of an idea that many of us will recognize from the Mishnah in Yoma. The Mishnah in Yoma says, Averot sheben adam lamakom Yom Kippurim mechaper, right? Transgressions between man and God, Yom Kippurim affects atonement. But Averot sheben adam lechavero, and Yom Kippurim mechaper ad sheyiratzeh et chavero. For transgressions between man and man, Yom Kippurim doesn't affect atonement until one has appeased the other person. So we see this in both of these Mishnayot, or the Mishnah and the Braita, the idea that the fate of the injurer is in the injured party's hand. And the same principle is applying in both of these texts, but there's a difference with regard to the initial assumption that the Mishnah is responding to, right? In Yoma, the initial assumption is that Yom Kippurim is enough to affect atonement, and the Mishnah has to emphasize, no, you have, in Ben Adam Lechavero, you have to go and have a conversation. In the Mishnah in Baba Kama, the initial assumption is that payment is sufficient. And the Mishnah is emphasizing, no, you have to go and have a conversation. So both of these Mishnayot are emphasizing the idea, the innovation, the chiddush of both of these Mishnayot is that transgressions against another person, it's not just an abstract damage that, oh, I created a damage or I made a transgression, and now I need to, create a metaphysical solution by paying damages or by bringing a korban or by fasting on Yom Kippur. No, let's not forget that this is about relationships. These averot are about relationships. You hurt a person. You didn't just create a damage. You didn't just create nezik. You hurt a person. And so in addition to the payments or in addition to fasting on Yom Kippur, you have to go and have a conversation with a person. You have to leratzot the other person. You have to come and face up to your to what you did and ask for the forgiveness of another person. And I think that is perhaps what is lying behind, at least partially, what Rav Yehuda said in the statement that one who wants to become pious should engage specifically in Dinei Nezikin, right? Because in contrast to Kodashim that we're going to start now, which are, even when they weren't theoretical, they were related to the sphere of Ben Adam Lamakom. And similarly, Brachot, and maybe similarly also Avot, and many areas of the Torah are actually about a person's self-perfection in relationship with God. Nezikin, what's unique about Nezikin is that it's really about being in relationships with other people. And Rav Yehuda is telling us that's an important part of becoming a better person, of becoming a chassid. We cannot do that in a vacuum. We're always going to be part of a society. And when we're part of a society, then becoming a better person, becoming a chassid means facing up to our shortcomings by owning up to them in relationship to other people. And indeed, we don't have time to go into this, but on this Mishnah in Masechet Yoma, we find many stories about Chachamim, different Chachamim, and how they responded when they were either the injurer or the injured party. And we can see there that it's not so easy, right? That even being the injured party sometimes can be a very difficult experience, and it's not so easy to forgive, and it's certainly not so easy to ask for forgiveness. And the Chachamim tell these stories about themselves in order to explain to us that yes, it's a high bar, it's something that's difficult to do, but as we study Nezikin, and more than that, as we engage in Nezikin, as we bring Nezikin to life, as we observe the matters of Nezikin, right? Lekayem milei de Nezikin, then that is really what ultimately turns us into people who are more Hasidim, who are more God-fearing, and enables us to reach a higher level of self-perfection and bringing the world to become a better place.
Beautiful. Really connected with the end of the Masechet, with the difficulty to forgive. The Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel couldn't really completely forgive. Thank you, Ayelet. We're now going to move on to the next shiur, Rabbanit Yael Shimoni, who is the Deputy Rosh Yeshiva and Ramit at Yeshivat Risha. And we're very excited to have her with us. Also relating to books, it's good to know what books have come out recently. There's a new book from a project that Rabbanit Yael has been involved in, Meshivat Nefesh, which is women who are answering halachic questions. And there's some tshuvas and an introduction by Rabbanit Yael. So anyone who wants to read the book, I don't think it's translated yet, but hopefully it will be translated. And Rabbanit Yael.
Thank you, Michelle. So I would like to learn with you today something really connecting to Rosh Hashana. I thought aloud about what Rabbanit Michelle asked me to do, to speak about Teshuva, and since we're mamash close to Rosh Hashana, I thought that the right place to work with is a new idea, actually an idea that I heard from my husband, Rav Shimoni, who teaches in Yeshivat HaRtzion, and also was a lawyer and now teaches in Hebrew University. And he likes Nezikin very much and taught Baba Khan many times. And recently he wrote a short paper in the honor of Judge Neil Handel, who was the Supreme Justice in Israel and now has retired. And his idea, I thought, was something that could really connect to us because we're before Rosh Hashana. So I want to start by talking a little bit about Rosh Hashana, and actually we're going to also learn a bit of Zohar, which is maybe not so common in the Gefet that I do, but it is Rosh Hashana. And then from that, I will try to relate to his ideas and Gemarot in Masechet Baba Kama that might enlighten in a new light the things that the Zohar says about Rosh Hashana. So that's the plan. Okay, so Rosh Hashana, as we know, is a very strange holiday because it's strange for those in Israel. In the States, you're used to it. It's 2 days, again, 2 days. Sometimes you have 3 days. Everything is fine. For us, Israelis, it is a shock. The fact that we have 2 days and then sometimes 3 days is something very, very disturbing. And how did that happen? How come people here in Israel are still doing that? How come those who come to Israel and escape Yom Tov Sheni can't escape Yom Tov Sheni when it comes to Rosh Hashana? So there's a lot in that in the Gemarot. I'm using Aruch HaShulchan just to zoom us through what happened to Rosh Hashana. So Aruch HaShulchan says that the 2 days of Rosh Hashana are not like other days. Why? Because all the other days, the second day of Yom Tov is really based on the idea of Safek. What happened is that we were Mekadesh, the Chodesh, by Edim. Edim had to come and see the moon. And if they didn't come on the first day, we knew that the next day is Rosh Chodesh. It's very interesting in itself. The story of Kiddush Chodesh, that's the beginning of Am Yisrael, are sort of connecting to time and being able to create time to a certain extent when it comes to the moon. But what happens is that nobody who's far away from the Beit Din will know when Rosh Chodesh actually came in until much, much later. And that's why those in the Gola have to do 2 days because they're not sure. Even if the Chag is in the middle of the month, maybe something happened to the Shlichim, they don't know when Rosh Chodesh was. So you have 2 days that each one of them is Safek. And that's a very interesting situation in Halacha. We love Sfekot. It happens many times. But Rosh Hashana, what's so special about it is that even those in Israel itself, in Eretz Yisrael, didn't know which day it was. Why? Because it's the only holiday that's on the first day of the month. This is very, very rare. Our holidays are in the middle of the month. What's this? The first day of the month. The moon is not seeing Am Yisrael is the moon. It is very, very strange that we're having a holiday on the first day of the month. And that creates this the strangest that even in Israel, there was a safek. People didn't know. And that's why also in Eretz Yisrael, many, many times, 2 days were observed. So that's what Aruch HaShulchan says. ראש השנה עושים גם בארץ ישראל 2 ימים, גם היום. And why is that? Well, he explains everything I said now, and then he goes on to what happened later. Now we're not waiting for the eating to come anymore, right? We already have we know exactly when the holidays are. So how come you're still doing 2 days of Yom Tov? Finishes Rosh Hashana and says, even though there's no suffix anymore, מכל מקום התקנה הראשונה עומדת במקומה. So your 2 days of Yom Tov, it's because of the takana. We don't change what was done for so many years. We're sticking with it. We're staying with the takana. But still, says Rosh Hashulchan, אף על פי כן, אחד מהם ספק ואחד מהם דאורייתא. Okay, so the first day of Yom Tov, one of them is דאורייתא, the first day, and the second one is only mishuma safek and has a different meaning and a different halachic substance, and that will cause all kinds of nafkaminot. אבל בראש השנה, שהוא בראש חודש עצמו, גם בירושלים, היו עושים הרבה פעמים 2 ימים. Aruch HaShulchan says, even in Israel, even in Jerusalem itself, many times, then we had 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Why? How did that happen? והיינו, אם באו עדי ראייה ביום הראשון, שראו את מולד הלבנה, היו עושים רק יום אחד. Okay, if the Eidim came on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, so in Jerusalem they did 1 day, and everywhere else they had to do 2 days. But sometimes the Eidim didn't even come the first day; they came only the second day. And since that happened many times, so Chachamim tikunu that also in Jerusalem itself we will do 2 days. נמצא שברוב השנים עשו גם בירושלים 2 שנים, וזאת הייתה התקנה. And then continues Aruch HaShulchan and says, because that was the takana on Rosh Hashanah, that takana also remained. The same takana that remained in the Golah also remained in Jerusalem and in Eretz Yisrael. And that's why we do 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, because we stick to that original takana. But continues Aruch HaShulchan, וזהו שאמרו חז"ל, דחיומא אריכתא דמי. Chachamim were afraid that people will not respect the second day, will not respect the takana, since all those in Israel are not used to having 2 days. So they made it stronger. And they said it's not really 2 days. Actually, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, it's 1 long day. Not really. Ke, as if. Rav Lichtenstein taught me that when there's a ke, kaf adimyon, we have to listen to that very closely. It's not exactly, it's as if it's a long day. And says Aruch HaShulchan, because of that, you have different dinim, many things you're machmir in Rosh Hashanah, second day of Rosh Hashanah. For example, a beita that beita shenolda b'yom tov, we have a din that if you have new milk or new eggs that were created on the first day of Yom Tov, the second day of Yom Tov you can already use them. Why? Because the first day of Yom Tov you don't know if it's Yom Tov or not, so it's a suffix. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So you can't use anything. But the second day of Yom Tov, if it is Yom Tov, then the milk and the eggs were already created on Chol. And if it's not Yom Tov, so now it's fine to use them. So that's why the second day of Yom Tov, you can always use all these things that are Muktzeh and Nolad. That's fine. But not in Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, you can't use them at all. But when there's something that is really connected to Kvod HaBriot, for example, burying, then also in Rosh Hashanah, you're a Mekel. So this is a very, very special situation that we have. The Rosh Hashanah, it's 2 days. It's as if it's 1 day. It's not really, because you do bury somebody if he died on the first day. You will bury him the second day, because, again, it is a suffix. But Chazal made it strong because they were afraid that the people in Eretz Yisrael will not take it seriously. And then says Aruch HaShulchan, that's why there's also another interesting machloket. Now we can understand why do we have to have a new fruit on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Why is that? It's because there's a machloket between the Geonim and Rashi. Do we say Shechianu on the second day? If it's really 1 long day, so you don't have to say Shechianu. You said Shechianu on the first day. There's no need to say it on the second day. But Rashi says no. It is true that it's 1 long day when it comes to all the things that you have to be machmir, which are not dead people. That's true. But this is the ikar of Yom Tov. We say a kiddush on the second day. Shofar is like Kiddush. It is the mitzvah of the Yom. So if you created this another day, you have to say Shechianu again. And that is the machloket between the Geonim and Rashi. Most of the Rishonim went with Rashi, but still, because we want to be Yotze with the Geonim, that's why we have a new fruit. So we say Shechianu on the new fruit, on Kiddush, that's because of the Geonim. Still, when it comes to shofar, if you'll notice, there's no Baal Tukiyah that brings a new fruit to shul, and he doesn't take a bite from a new fruit before he's doing the tkiyot. He doesn't wear a new clothes, so it's only on Kiddush. That's why we see Rashi won and the Geonim really lost, but that's really why we bring the special fruit, Shechianu, on the second day of Rosh Hashana. So this was all just to remember the halachot, the basic halachot of Zoom through the sugiyot. Now I want to move to the Zohar. Once we have these 2 days of Rosh Hashana, there's a big question in our hearts. The tefillot of Rosh Hashana are very, very, very demanding. And we know it's Yom Din. So are we standing in front of God twice in Din, day after day, exactly the same way? The Zohar says, no. You should know that once there are 2 days, something different happens on the second day. And the Zohar in Parashat Pinchas, the Zohar is in Aramaic, so I don't understand it so well, and it doesn't matter if you speak Hebrew or English. So I'll read the Aramaic and translate it into English. The Zohar says, "B'yomei de Rosh Hashana, metaknin bedina kursaya lemalka." On the day of Rosh Hashana, we are creating the chair for God. Lemeidan kol alma, the chair of judgment. That's the chair that God will sit upon. V'Yisrael alain bekadmita bedina kamei, delifush rachme, tanan u'mishpat amo Yisrael dvar yom beyomo. Okay, so Israel come in front of God first, to be the ones first in the din, and they ask for more rachamim from God. And we learned that from the pasuk, u'mishpat amo Yisrael dvar yom beyomo. What does it mean, mishpat amo Yisrael dvar yom beyomo? The judgment of Am Yisrael every single day. Yom beyomo, what's every single day? Mai have. Ela, says the Zohar, Hane tre yomin de Rosh Hashana. The pasuk that says dvar yom beyomo, the repetition of the word day, yom, means that there are 2 days here. Emai trin yomin. So here the Zohar asks, why do we have 2 days? And instead of all this explanation that I explained from Aruch HaShulchan, the Zohar has a different explanation. Why do we need 2 days? Begin the inuna trei beidina de mitchabrin kechada. There are 2 batei din, there are 2 judgment halls that come together as one. What are the 2 judgments? Dina ila'a, the higher din. The ihukashya, which is hard. The dina tita'a, on the lower din, the hu rafya. I don't know if it's the right way to translate rafya. Soft, I guess, is the best way. V'travayu mishtakche, and both of them are on Rosh Hashana. So the Zohar teaches us that there are 2 different dinim. The first day is the higher din, which is hard, and the second day is a lower din, which is softer, and both of them come together as one. Now, on this passage of the Zohar, many, many things have been written. I think it's a very famous Zohar. It's quoted many times. On Rosh Hashana, very briefly, so now you see the entire text. This is, again, a part of the text itself is much longer, and there's more elaboration there. And there are many different ways of explaining what does this mean, that the higher din is hard and the lower din is soft, and different ways of understanding the Zohar. What I want to do today is to understand the Zohar with Masechet Baba Kama, which you've learned, and to see if maybe what we've learned in Nezikin can help us put meaning into these 2 different dinim. And again, b'zchut Harav Shimoni, my husband, that I really enjoyed when he showed me this in the Gemara. So we'll return to Baba Kama. I see there's a lot of Baba Kama today, and well, it's the beginning. So let's see, what's the hard din, what's the soft din? I'll just say that I think this is very contemporary. Like there's a lot of talk today about there's something and then you do it softer, right? Something soft, like soft law, soft. I don't know. I feel it's very, very common. So it's interesting that we have this already here in the Zohar, and I want to see it in Baba Kama. Okay. So I would have thought that if I would give this year, I would have gone to Baba Kama Tzadik Tet. There we know that there's din and lifnim mishurat din. We would think that maybe this is what the Zohar is talking about. There's din and there's rachamim. Lifnim mishurat din means you don't go according to law. You actually go according to a different midah. And that's why I don't think this is the right way to explain the Zohar, because the Zohar said both of these things are din. It's not din and rachamim. No. It's dina kasha and dina rafia. Both of them are dinim. So that's why I want to go to a different place in Baba Kama. So this is a lovely, famous, loved sugya, the machloket on chatzi nezek. Chatzi nezek of Keren. We have 4 about Nezikim, Hashor, Habor, Hamav'eh, Va'iv'er. And Hashor, the ox, can either harm you by eating or by charging to you. And when he charges, it depends what kinds of ox it is. All the oxes are born shor tam. They're not supposed to charge people. They're supposed to be really nice and normal. And when I have the kind of ox, I don't expect him to hurt other people. And then suddenly he does. If he does it 3 times, we take him to Beit Din, very strange. Take an ox to Beit Din, you've learned all of that. And then he becomes mu'ad. And then if he hurts a person, then you're chayav nezek shalem. If he hurts you, or if he hurts, let's say, the ox charged your dog or your ox, so then you'll have to pay the entirety of what he destroyed. That's the din. What happens if he wasn't mu'ad? He's tam. You didn't expect him to do this. Right? He's really, really calm usually. What's the din then? So the Mishnah says you're chayav chatzi nezek. You don't have to pay the entire nezek, only half of it. And the Morim were in machloket. Why? Why do you pay half? Palganiska. Rav Papa amar mamona, Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua amar kenasa. The machloket of Rav Papa and Rav Yoshua bered Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua is whether or not paying half is a punishment, is extra. Actually, you were supposed not to pay anything, but then God said, for some reason, we'll see what the reason is, you have to pay the half. Or originally you had to pay everything, but you are getting less because you really didn't know what was going to happen. So let's start by Rav Papa. Rav Papa amar mamona, kasavar, stam shvarim lav bechizkat shimur kaime, ubedinu debai leshalem kulei, verachmana udechas alei, so Rav Papa says, actually, all oxes need to be guarded. Everybody, all the time. You should have guarded your ox. You didn't guard it, and that's why he harmed. You are guilty, says Rav Papa. You were supposed to pay the entire price. So why does God tell you only pay half? Rachmana hu dechas alei. Rachmana, that's Rachamim. You hear the name of God in Rachamim. He's lenient with you because it didn't happen before. So here, there's something very interesting that's happening in this sugya. We all know that chatzi nezek is din. Chatzi nezek is not lifnim mishurat din. It's not rachamim. It is hardcore halacha. And yet Rav Papa chooses different words to describe halacha. He says, סתם שברים לה בחזקת שימור קיימי ובדין הוא דלבאי לשמי כולי. The din was that you should have paid everything. Why? Because you were guilty. Din works with guilt. You're guilty, you have to pay everything. That's how din works. And then there's a different din. The different din is called Rahmana. It's also din. But it suddenly says, even though you're guilty, we'll view you differently. So if I'll sum up what we learned from Rav Papa, what's happening here with the din and with the Rachamana, so dina is guilt. If you're guilty, you pay. And Rachmana, there's a nuance. Okay, there's nuance here. You're not as guilty. Still, you're not as guilty as other people. So we see the difference here between the two dinim. We might say between the dina kasha and the dina rafia. The dina kasha says any kind of guilt will make you pay all the consequences of what you've done. But Rahmana will say, guilt is not black and white. There's nuance there. There's room to see it differently. And that's the Dina Rafia, I think. So let's see what Rav Huna Ber Rav Yeshua says. He's also using these two words, Dina and Rahmana, but he's saying something slightly different. And what's the difference between them? Let's see. Rav Huna Ber Rav Yeshua Amar Kenasa. He says, this whole idea of Chatzi Nezek is a punishment. You're not really guilty. You're not guilty. Kasavar stam svarim becheskat shimur kaime. You were not supposed to guard your ox. Bedin hu delo lishalem klal. You were not supposed to pay anything. Rahmana hu dekanse. This is very interesting. Rahmana here is not always lenient with you. Sometimes Rahmana chooses to have you pay when you're not guilty. Why? Why? Ki hechi delintere letore. So I think what we're seeing here is that Rahmana, this lower midat hadin, doesn't only look at justice, it also looks at other areas and thinks maybe I need to use the law in order to help the world or to take care of other problems. It's using the law for other reasons, for other needs. Extrajudicial, I don't say that word correctly, so it's written here. That's Rahmana. Okay, Rahmana doesn't mean you get less. Rahmana sometimes means you will pay more because I don't care only about justice, I care also about other things. I'm widening my view of justice. And Dina, you don't pay anything because it's pure justice. If you're not guilty, you won't pay anything. So for some people we saw in this sugya, hard din is only guilt. You have guilt, you pay. You don't have guilt, you don't pay. That's what we look. Okay? It's efes achad, 0-1, black and white. That's the story. Soft din doesn't mean it's always lenient. It means it takes into account other principles. And it means also there's nuance. It widens the broad of justice. It doesn't look just on justice, doesn't see it as black and white, it's gray. And also other things are bundled inside it. And it's not always more lenient. That's very important to remember. So this was one sugya that we can see that the Gemara itself is creating two dinim, Dina and Dina Rahmana. And again, the Rahmana is not always lenient. Now let's look at another place in Nezikin, Niskei Shen. Niskei Shen, the Mishnah says, if my animal went and ate your, if you grew vegetables and it ate one of your plants, okay, how much does it pay? Ketzad mishalemet. The Mishnah Baba Kama, פרק שישי, ו"ב. ירדה כדרכה והזיקה, משלמת מה שהזיקה, כיצד משלמת מה שהזיקה, שמין בצעה באותה שדה כמה הייתה יפה וכמה היא יפה. This is very important to remember. It always shocks me, this shuma. The animal, you were growing, let's say, strawberries, and then the animal came and ate a whole plant of strawberries. If I would have sold those strawberries, they would have cost, let's say, $30, okay? But what the Mishnah is saying here, instead of paying $30, you look how much is this entire plot worth, and how much is it worth now that she ate one plot. It's much less. It's easy to explain. Let's say you have a house, right, and the house has windows, and you're selling the house. You don't count the windows. Somebody broke your window. How much will they have to pay for the window, or how much the house has lost from the amount that you're going to get for it when you're going to sell it? If somebody destroyed your wheel in your car, to buy a new tire costs a lot of money. But according to the Mishnah, you don't pay for a wheel. You'll pay how much that car actually lost. If you would have sold it with that wheel or without, that's much less. Much, much less. This is a very, very, very lenient amount to ask from the owner of the animal that ate the strawberries. And the Gemara asks, where do we know this from? How did we learn this? We learned this as the Gemara from Gzerat HaKatuv. Minane mile amar Rav Matana, the amar kra ube'er besadeh acher. Be'er besadeh acher, that's the pasuk. Here you can see the pasuk right here. וכי יבער איש שדה או כרם, ישלח את ביערו וביער בשדה אחר. מיטב שדה ומיטב כרמו ישלם. ביער בשדה אחר, says Rav Matana, means ששמים אגב שדה אחר. You don't see how much she ate, you see how much damage she created to the plot. So this is really, really a very lenient amount that you're asking. And in Baba Kama, in Zayin, Amud Aleph, we see that this idea is not only in this case Shen, it's actually widened to a lot of other areas. Amar Rava, אין שמים לפרה בפני עצמה ולוולד בפני עצמו, אלא שמים לוולד על גב הפרה. Also, if an ox hit your cow and it was pregnant and she lost her calf, how much do you pay? You don't pay for the calf, you pay for how much the cow's worth went down. שאם אתה אומר כן, says Rava, נמצא אתה מכחיש את המזיק. Rava here says, why am I saying this? Why am I using this lenient shuma? Because if I won't do this, you know what will happen? God forbid. The mazik will lose a lot of money. And Rava says, and that's also why we do the same thing. If somebody hurt me and destroyed my arm, כן אתה מוצא בקוטע יד עבדו של חברו, וכן אתה מוצא במזיק שדה של חברו. All these we do the lenient. Why? Because we don't want the mazik to lose a lot of money. And then the Gemara continues. אמר לרבחה ברי דרבה לרב אשי, והדין ההוא לכחוש mazik. What is Rava talking about? If this is the din, so the one responsible has to pay the price. So what if he's bankrupt now? I don't care. That's the din. V'din ההוא לכחוש mazik. And then the answer that Rav Ashi answers Rav Acha, Mishum de Amarle, Para me'abarta aziktei para me'abarta shayminan lach. Says Rav Ashi, it is not totally not din, because in some way that's really what happened. That is also true. That is a different way of looking at the situation. And it's very interesting to see that the Rosh is saying this is pasking lahalacha. That's true. We that's what we're pasking lahalacha. We take the leniency for the mazik. We're like helping the mazik survive. So if we'll see what happened here again, we have here two dinim. There's the din that's what Rav Acha Berei de Rava is shouting in the sugya. The din says likhush mazik. Okay, the din ignores the sinner. The din kasha, the hard din. There's also another din that takes into account the sinner. He's also part of it. And when we have to choose between two different ways of seeing reality, we will choose the one more lenient to the sinner. That's Dina Rafia. This really always causes me a lot of thought. I'm giving this to you. You can think about it more. I'm just summing up what we saw. I think these Gemarot are beautiful. They can help us understand more what will happen to us in Rosh Hashana if we want to dive into Seder Nezikin, right? So the first day is hardi. There's only guilt there. If you're guilty, you pay the price. You're not guilty, you're off. Your needs as a sinner are not taken into account. But the soft team takes into account other principles. Sometimes it means you'll pay more because you have to take care of somebody else, not only you. There's nuance there. Guilt is not black and white. And it all will also take the sinner into account. That's the second day of Rosh Hashana. So it is interesting that the Zohar said that both of these things come together on Rosh Hashana, and we seem to flow through these two different world views. Both of them din. This is not rachamim. These are both din. And that's really what happens to us in Rosh Hashana. So I don't know if you felt it in Rosh Hashana, that the first day is more hard and the second day is softer. And what does it mean when it's soft? Is soft easier, better, or just different? So these are really thoughts for us. Baruch Hashem, you finished the Seder, and I think a lot of times my Yun walks with me also to Tefillah. So I'm hoping maybe this will also escort you on your way. Baruch Hashem, we should have a Shana Tova and Gemar Chatima Tova. And thank you, Rabbanit Michelle, for asking me to think about these thoughts now. Because of you, I had the zchut of doing this connection. So thank you.
Wonderful.
And
Thank you.
Zato for finishing the HaShas. איפה היא? כך מרגש.
Julie, yeah.
Baruch Hashem, Julie.
Thank you, Rabbanit Yael, very much.
Welcome to the new Hadran website, a vibrant space for Talmud learning by women for women. Our new design is clean, simple, and easy to use, so you can find what you need quickly on any device. Whether you're joining Daf Yomi, subscribing to weekly Shirim, exploring a tractate that speaks to you, or diving into a self-paced course, your learning journey starts here. Thoughtfully curated, expertly taught, and always accessible. Subscribe to your favorite teachers and classes. Get gentle reminders and updates tailored to your goals. Explore our new tools like the glossary and calendar to deepen your understanding. Our learners' tapestry now shines brighter, celebrating you, the women who make this space so special. Every learner is a thread in our shared story. All of this, free of charge, open to women and men, and welcoming to beginners. Join us at hadran.org.il and become part of a growing community of Talmud learners.
Okay, that was just a little taste of the website that was dedicated in memory of Carol Joy Robinson. We extend our profound thanks to Rabbi Art Gold. The dedication and unwavering support made this website possible. Your dedication to this project, Carol's memory, is a gift that I think honors her spirit really in a very meaningful way. May her memory continue to be a source of blessing and comfort and inspiration to you and your family and her friends and anyone who was touched by her life. I wanted to say that was just a small taste of some of the things you can do on the website. Of course, we didn't relate too much to your patience, and thank you, as we are fixing bugs and going through the growing pains of a new website. So thank you for that, and you may require some more of that. I wanted to speak about how when Hadran started out, and basically it was a one-woman show, we had Michelle, who worked with one woman who built a website based on what we thought sort of what would happen. And we've had a dream for years to be able to highlight the growing variety of options to learn with Hadran and to highlight all the women scholars who are amazing teachers. So this is part of what we've done tonight. All of the women who you've seen tonight, you can follow their channel or them as teachers on the website. Yeah, we've been wanting to adapt the site to our growing community as well. Different types of learners and different types of creators. You can now see recently viewed things, like the website will remember what you've seen recently. If you're registered and you've told it what you want to follow, then it'll show you what's your next stuff or what's your next year. You can get notified directly. You could also turn off all your notifications for those of you who are not enjoying those. You can mark things as done, which is amazing for you guys who've been keeping track for years on your DAF journey. And now you can just mark it on the site and you'll know that you've finished this and that. You can find a DAF based on the calendar from which you can get to the shir you're looking for. Let's say if you remember there was a day specifically last week that you missed a DAF, you'll go straight to that date, find the shir directly there. And most importantly, and the newest thing you can do is to follow specific shirim and specific teachers. I will create tutorials more thorough than the one that I've just shown you. And hopefully we'll all learn to love the new website.
Thank you to Maggie for the dedicated hard work day in, day and night working to make the website happen. And thank you to Rabbi Art Gold. Really appreciate really appreciate it. And to the last part, before we get to the tefillot, we have Dr. Elana Stein Hain. One of the things I hope you all appreciate about the teachers on our site is that they're able to take complex material and simplify it to a very broad audience. And it's one of the things that I think is really true of all of our teachers. And so if you haven't tried one of our teachers yet, I highly recommend you try listening and following. I know not everyone has time for more than the daf, but if you do, it's definitely worth your while. So with that, we're going to have an introduction to Kodashim. I thought it'd be fun to have, since
Great.
Ayelet always does the introductions, this time have Elana do the introduction.
Hello, everyone. So you are the hardcore because we've been on this for a while. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk for about 10 minutes about the following question. Why should you learn Kodashim? Kodashim has nothing to do with your daily halachic living. Okay, Masechet Chulin. Okay, there's a little in Menachot about tzitzis. But why should you learn Kodashim? And if you think this is my question, it's not my question. It's a question that was asked in the time of the Gaonim, essentially towards the end of the Gaonic period. Think early 11th century. And the answer was, well, it depends. If you were in Sfarad or North Africa, the answer was, don't learn Kodashim. If you were in Germany or southern France, the answer was, maybe the Mishnayot of Kodashim. If you were in Tzarfat, if you were in northern France, you were learning Kodashim. And so what I want to do for the next few minutes is talk about why people learn Kodashim, given that so little of it is halacha l'maaseh. So I'm going to share my screen. And I know I can do this funny as background thing, putting yourself in the text most literally. So first of all, I just want to tell you that there were those in Ashkenaz who were not happy that people were not studying Kodashim. And I love the comment of the Sefer Hasidim, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, although this part might have been written by his father, Rabbi Shimoni Chassid, because they each wrote part of the Sefer. He says, Ehov lecha et mitzvah hadoma lemeit mitzvah she'en la'oskim. You should choose to love the mitzvah that is similar to a meit mitzvah. What's a meit mitzvah in halacha? A person who has no one to bury them. So any of us who pass them by, we have a chiyuv to bury them. So things that people do not engage in, you should look at those as a meit mitzvah, and you should love those things. Kasher tir'eh mitzvah b'zuya she'en lecha oskim. When you see a mitzvah that is sort of scorned, put into the corner, and nobody's engaging it, kigon shetir'eh shemibnei ircha shelomdim seder moed b'seder nezikin. Maybe you'll see that people in your town are learning the Seder that's generally about holidays, or learning the Seder that's generally about torts. Or we can add in here Seder Nashim, right? Those were the 3 Sederim that people were learning. So he says, V'ata tilmad Seder Kodashim. You should learn Kodashim. Think of it as a meit mitzvah. You go pick it up and take care of it. The question is, though, in Tzarfat, in northern France, they actually decided to do this. It wasn't like in Germany, where people like Rabbi Yehuda Chassid were saying, please do this, because apparently since the time of the Gaonim, in most of the Jewish learning world, people were not learning Kodashim. So we find, I would say, one very clear explanation from Rabbi Moshe of Coucy, northern France, in the 13th century, also known as the Smag. He says, "V'yesh mehamon am she'omrim balanu u'lemitzvot seder Kodashim u'lemitzvot seder Kodashim." A lot of people say, what do we need this for? Kal v'chomer l'mitzvot seder zera. We certainly don't need seder zera. U'lemitzvot seder tyro. We don't need that either. V'lidvarim she'en noagim b'zman hazeh. These things are not relevant today. So he says, no. Al yomar adam kain ki hamitzvot asher tziva adon ha'olam yesh leida yisodotehem. A person should not say this. And you know, our speaker who finished HaShas today, you really brought this theme. You shouldn't say this because any mitzvah that the ruler of the world has given us, we have a responsibility to know its foundations. Even if it's not needed now. Ki al kol hamitzvot yitztavinu, because about all mitzvot we were told either ulamadatem otam, which is you should learn them, or v'limadatem otam, you should teach them. Depends on where in Devarim we're actually quoting from. So that's the first answer that's given by a Tsarfati, a Northern French rabbi and scholar. We should do this because it's understanding Hashem's Torah. That's one answer. I want to give you three more to take with you into your learning of Zvachim and beyond. The second is Dr. Ephraim Kannerfogel has a great article where he tries to figure out why is it that the French Tosafists were interested in learning Kodashim and scholars in Germany and southern France weren't. So he says, I think this has a lot to do with the way they perceive themselves. Ba'alei HaTosfot shebetzarfat ra'u et atzmam be'ikar kiroshei yeshiva. The Tosafists in northern France saw themselves principally as heads of yeshivot, upachot kedayanim, and less as judges in a court. Ba'od shechochmei Germania ra'u et atzmam be'ikar kedayanim ukeposkei halacha. On the other hand, German scholars actually saw themselves more as judges and as halachic decisors. And then he goes on to say that actually in each of these centers, you see a different focus. The yeshiva was the focus in France, or northern France at least, and the Beit Din and all learning around it was the focus in Germany. So of course in France, they just wanted to learn lishma. It wasn't always about halacha l'maaseh. It was learning Torah lishma. There's a second reason to do it. A third, we don't talk a lot, except in certain moments where Chazal talk about things, Zecher l'Churban. We don't talk a lot when we're learning Chazal about what an incredibly destabilizing time this was. The idea of the loss of the Beit HaMikdash, this was not just losing your JCC or losing your shul. This was literally losing the centripetal force, the central force that helped you understand what being religious meant, what a covenant meant. And so you actually get these incredible views. And I know that Midot doesn't have a Masechet of Gemara for it, but you get these incredible views where essentially the rabbis are wistful for what was. And they're actually desperately trying to preserve something that was lost. And when we're learning Kodashim, we are sitting there with them, holding on to the pieces. So I love this Mishnah in Midot that talks about 5 gates on the Temple Mount. And my favorite is that one of the gates, lo haya mishamish klum, they didn't use it for anything. Right? Meaning we just want to know that it was. And the same with korbanot, and the same with the details of the avoda, the same with all of these things that really remind us of what was lost. Now, there are people who look and say it's not just reminding us of what was lost, it's also noticing there are things that we took with us from the world of Kodashim, and we brought them into the world of Chulin, really into the world of Orach Chaim, the world of daily Jewish living. So for example, when we look at an example like Rav Sheshet, when he would have a Tanit, when he would fast, Bater Dematzle Amar Hachi, after he davened, he would say the following, Ribon ha'olamim, sovereign of the universe, Galui lefanecha b'zman shebeit hamikdash kayam, you know that when the temple stood, Adam chotel makriv korban, a person, if they sinned, they could give an offering. Ve'ein makrivim mimenu elachel bo v'damo, and all that was given of it are its fats and its blood. Right? Be prepared to learn a lot about fats and bloods and blood. Umit kaperlo, and the person gains kapara. Ve'achshav yashavti b'ta'anit, and now I sat in a fast. V'nitma'et chelbi v'dami, and I have lost some of my fat and some of my blood, right? An interesting medical read. Yihi ratzon milfanecha shehei chelbi v'dami shenitma'et ki'ilu hikrafti l'fanecha al gabei hamizbeach v'tirtzeni. It should be your will that my fat and my blood that have lessened through the course of my fasting, it's as though I gave them on the mizbeach and you have accepted me. And we see, all sorts of things where we basically say the ideas, the themes of Kodashim, the themes of sacrifice. We don't want to lose those themes. We're going to take them with us. The theme of, even this week, we're going to talk about Lishma, as Michelle mentioned. We're going to talk about Lishma. Is Lishma the same as Kavana? Is it something else? Are these connected? The theme of sacred space. Look at the way that Chazal talk about Eruv. Look at the way that Chazal talk about Sukkah. These sacred space places, what do they have in common? What are they taking from the world of Kodashim? So those are just 4 reasons to learn Kodashim. We might learn it because these are mitzvot of Hashem, and we have a responsibility to understand their yesodot. We might learn it because we're learning the Shema. We're not learning halacha l'masa here. This is not a halacha l'masa kind of course that we're trying to do. We might learn it simply to appreciate what is lost and the magnitude of what was there and how much Chazal cared to preserve every jot and tittle to the degree that they could. We might learn it because actually so much of our Orach Chaim in little ways is yonek, is actually nourished from some of the ideas in the Mikdash. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're parallel and a little different. And actually that's the topic of Din and Daf this week. What is the relationship between Lishma and Kavana? Are those actually together, or are these parallel concepts, one in the Mikdash and one bigvulin outside of the Mikdash? So happy learning, everybody.
Amazing. Thank you for that very, very relevant introduction. To remind you, if you haven't listened to Ayelet, also you can listen to Ayelet's introduction. It's up on the site. And I wanted to just mention, because I mentioned all the other books of everybody else who spoke tonight. So Elana also has a book that came out in the last year. Is that right? Circumventing the Law. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's also a read. And we're now going to invite Julie Mendelsohn, who we're very proud of and very excited. And if please make sure to read her words because she didn't want to speak. So instead she wrote. She's an excellent writer. And I recommend you read her words. It's very beautiful, very meaningful. We're going to hear it from Julie Mendelsohn, Tina Lamb, and Miriam Tannenbaum. We're going to finish up with the tefillot for tonight.
I have it.
Finding the tefillot. Here we go. Okay.
For my soldiers and everybody's soldiers. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל ואנשי כוחות הביטחון העומדים על משמר ארצנו וערי אלוהינו מגבול הלבנון ועד מדבר מצרים ומן הים הגדול עד לבוא הערבה ובכל מקום שהם ביבשה באוויר ובים. ייתן אדוני את אויבינו הקמים עלינו נגפים לפניהם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו מכל צרה וצוקה ומכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם. ידבר שונאינו תחתיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה ובעטרת ניצחון. ויקוים בהם הכתוב, כי אדוני אלוהיכם ההולך עמכם להילחם לכם, עם אויביכם להושיע אתכם, ונאמר אמן.
Amen.
יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שתשלח מהרה רפואה שלמה מן השמיים, רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף, לכל הפצועים במערכה. הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחמים עליהם, להחלימם ולרפאותם ולהחזיקם ולהחיותם. וישלח להם מהרה רפואה שלמה מן השמיים, לכל אבריהם ולכל גידיהם, בתוך שאר חולי ישראל. רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף, השתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן.
Amen.
יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שתחזק ותשמור ותנצור את אחינו בית ישראל, השבויים והשבויות בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעבורם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחמים עליהם, נשמרים מכל צרה וצוקה, מכל נגע ומחלה, ישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם, יוציאם מחושך וצלמוות ויושיבם מהרה הרחק משפחותיהם, ונאמר אמן.
Amen. Hashkaf to everybody. Good reason to celebrate. We have a long time until the next Siyum. Although you can join us tomorrow night if you want in Jerusalem. After that, January 12th. Looking forward to Zvachim. Hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Mazal tov, everybody.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Mazal tov.
Masal tov. Thank you so much.
Mazal tov.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Mazal tov, Julie.
Thank you.
Also, Julie.
Thank you.
Miracle
Thank
fast,
Mazel
Julie.
tov.
And yeah, Mazel Tov,
Thank
Julie.
you.
Wonderful.
We're so proud of
Mazel
you.
tov, everyone.
Wow.
Mazel tov.
Everybody spoke so beautifully.
And
Thank you.
Maggie,
The best teachers.
congratulations. And the site is for anybody who was trying to go on the site. It just came back up about 4 or 5 minutes ago.
Great.
So now you can see it live.
Yay.
Thank you and Mazel Tov.
Mazel tov. Thank you.
Thanks, Art. I thought it was me.
I always think it's me. It's okay.
Just in time for me to post the Siyum.
All right, guys.
Is
Thank
it correct?
you.
There's
See you
no-
tomorrow.
There's
We'll
no class Monday
There's no class
morning is
tomorrow.
full-time.
Tomorrow,
Okay.
right?
You have
or
a day
whatever
off.
it is by you. But yes, no class.
You have a day off tomorrow for those of you resting. Enjoy it. You don't often get that with a Daf Yomi. All right.
Thanks.
Good night,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
You, Mazel
Bye.
Tov.